Good morning, everyone, and please welcome Jeff Hunt, the chairman of the Western Conservative Summit.
All right, good morning. Did we have fun yesterday? You know, we trended nationally on Twitter yesterday. The eyes of the nation are upon Western Conservative Summit, and considering the lineup that we have today, I think it's going to even be bigger. Friends, please welcome Anna Shoemaker and Winston Ives from Colorado Christian University. They're going to lead us in prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, today I thank you for the beautiful privilege that we have to gather freely in assembly, to share stories, experiences, and lessons with one another. Thank you for each individual that you have orchestrated to be here today to share a portion of their stories. You, O Lord, are gracious to impart your wisdom to us that you may speak through us. God, I ask that you would open our hearts and our minds to help us to expand our worldview through the asking and the answering of tough questions. Give us compassion and understanding, humility and wisdom to grapple with the realities of the world that we live in today. Help us to pray for our leaders, to love our neighbors, and to live righteously in the eyes of God and men. Lord, it is because of the victorious work of your Son, Jesus Christ, that we may know you and love you. So it is in his glorious name that we pray. Amen.
Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, liberty and justice for all.
Please welcome the Honorable Jennifer Fielder, CEO of the American Lands Council.
Well, thank you. It is a great honor to be here today, representing the American Lands Council and sharing this important message with you about how we can take better care of our public lands. Because right now, let's get some slides up here. Right now, we have got catastrophic conditions on our federally controlled public lands. Backstage, bring the slides up, please. Get those up in just a moment. We've got these horrible conditions on our public lands, and there's no good reason for it. No, it's not just nature that's doing this. There's actually a bureaucracy that's taking care of our public lands in a way that's causing a lot of neglect. So today, we're going to share this message with you about how we can have better conditions on our public lands. Instead of catastrophic wildfires and polluted water and decimated wildlife, there is a better path forward. My name is Jennifer Fielder. I was elected to serve in the Montana State Senate in 2012. I still serve there today. But today I'm here with you from the American Lands Council, an organization that I am privileged to head up. It's a nationwide organization of elected officials, activists, public land users, resource experts, people who care about our public lands. And these are a few snapshots up here on the screen of where I live. I come from Northwest Montana. It's absolutely beautiful. The people that live there love our public lands. I love our public lands. Our family relies on these lands for our recreation, for our meat. We harvest meat from those lands. We go out and get our firewood from those public lands, and they are just so important to us and to the people of the rural West. We understand and we appreciate our public lands, but we know there's a better way to take care of them. Let's take a look at this map. This is the problem. This is not working. This is a map of the United States, and you see all the red on there? Those are the federally controlled lands in our country. Have you ever seen that map? Over 50% of the western United States, of all land in the western United States, is under control of the federal government, and it is not working. Not only is it not constitutional and not fair to treat these states differently than the other states, but it is definitely not working, and that's why I'm here with you today. For example, here is a picture of a forest. This forest is outside of Helena, Montana. And you can see half of the forest is dead. That is the federally controlled side. The other half of the forest is green. That is the locally controlled side of the forest. And you can see the property line right down the middle dividing those lands. Now, why is there a difference? Is that the climate causing difference on one side of the property line or the other? No, it's not. It's management. State and local management far exceeds the federal management in many, many cases, in fact, in most cases. Here's a typical national forest that's untended. It's dense, it's overgrown, and it's unhealthy. It has not been logged, it has not been thinned, and it is a catastrophic wildfire waiting to happen. And this is a scene from my patio one Sunday afternoon when one of those bits of forest succumbed to some sparks. This happened near a trailhead. This happened near a trailhead on a Sunday afternoon, and within hours we had this huge plume of smoke, and it was spewing deadly toxins into our air and water. And initial attack crews did not get on this fire when it was small and controllable near that trailhead. There was something going on with the bureaucracy that prevented people from getting in there and taking care of that fire when it was controllable, and it ended up turning into a $28 million disaster. These fires, once they get going in these unmanaged lands, destroy everything in sight. This is a chart of the acres burned in just about a 100-year period, and you can see that the chart is just in such a steep incline these last few years, these last few decades. We're seeing millions of acres every year now burned up, go up in smoke, polluting our air. Why are we letting this happen? Why are the environmentalists protecting the status quo? Why aren't they working with us? Don't we all want healthy air, water, and wildlife? Don't we all want that? Don't we all want abundant outdoor recreation and safe, vibrant communities? We all want that. Of course we all want that. But the hands-off management that we are seeing under federal control of our lands for the last several decades, this massive bureaucracy, and it doesn't matter which administration's in power, the bureaucracy is so massive, they're not able to manage these lands effectively. And there are very good people in these agencies that want to do a good job, but they cannot because of the system that they are in. And so we end up with this no compromise, hands off, don't touch mantra that's driving everything. And it doesn't work because our environment is not a museum. It's a garden. It's a very slow growing garden, but it's a garden and it benefits when we tend to it and take care of it. And we benefit from that as well. Because lack of vegetation management gives us dirty air, polluted water. This is a watershed. After one of these big fires, weeks, months, even a year later, you get this massive erosion because there's no vegetation on the hillsides anymore to hold the moisture. And so when you get a heavy rainfall or a heavy snow melt, you end up with this toxic sludge, all that ash. It washes down into the bottom and it settles in the stream beds and in the bottom of the drainages. And this is what you get with your water after these fires. So it's not just the fire and it's not just the smoke. You get this polluted air, polluted water. You get burned up wildlife. Wildlife is being burned up by the millions out there in these lands. Why aren't the environmentalists coming out and crying about this? Why aren't we seeing pictures of all the burned up wildlife on the news? They're suppressing the information. They don't want us to talk about the problems out there because I don't think they want them fixed. These organizations are making a killing on the status quo of the way these lands are being mismanaged now. Now, there's a lot of people that are environmentalists that do care. We've got to get this message to them so they can help us make these lands better, make the system better, make management better. We're also seeing blocked off access. Tens of thousands of miles of access routes have been blocked off in the last few decades. In Montana alone, 25,000 miles of roads have been blocked off in the last 25 years. 1,000 miles a year of our public access roads being blocked off, either gated or completely obliterated so that they're impassable to foot traffic. That is actually the policy in some of these federal land management plans. And because of this, we're seeing economically devastated, depressed, and unsafe communities. I want to tell you a little story about Cinder Bear. This is a little bear cub that crawled out of one of these fires. Cinder Bear made it out alive, but you can see her paws were badly burned all the way up to the elbows. Her neck is charred, her face is charred, but she was saved. She got out of the national forest and she got onto some private land. She got help from some neighbors. And the authorities were able to take care of her and nurse her back to health. She was saved, she was rehabilitated, and then she was released. But where was she released? Back into a national forest. A national forest where the trees are so thick that all it takes is one lightning strike, and once it gets going, there's no stopping it. There's no escape, like this unfortunate cow trying to outrun a fire got wedged between two trees because the trees are so close together because there's no logging happening anymore. And it's not just the big animals, it's not just the little animals. Millions of animals of all shapes and sizes are being lost in these fires. Do you think this little guy could outrun a wildfire? No. But it's not just the little ones that can't outrun it. Big animals as well are getting caught up in these things. Look at that beautiful buck burned alive. Livestock being burned up as this land spreads from, or as the fires spread from federal land to nearby adjacent private land. Free the Hammonds, that's right. We're working on that too. And here's one of the crazy things. This is just one example of the crazy things. And the Hammond Ranch story is another crazy thing. If you don't know what happened to the Hammond ranchers in Burns, Oregon, you need to look it up. Those men are ranchers who have been prosecuted as terrorists because a range management fire got a little bit out of control. Just a little bit. Didn't cause any damage, didn't cause any harm. And the Obama administration tried them as terrorists for burning federal, unoccupied federal land that they actually own the grazing rights on and graze on. Let's get back to this, though. Here's another crazy story. The federal government has actually prohibited some of the world's best firefighters from going in and putting out these fires. In Montana, for example, our Department of Natural Resources and Conservation helicopter teams were actually barred from fighting fires on federal land. It made all kinds of headlines. Montana helicopters were sidelined. The governor wrote a letter to the feds and kind of complained about it. It's crazy. The reason they wouldn't let the state helicopters go in and put out these fires when they were small is because the helicopters weren't on their list of approved equipment. That's the kind of stuff that's going on 1,000-fold every day. It's time to transfer federally controlled lands to willing states so that we can have, thank you. Because we can have better access, better health, and better productivity if we manage these things correctly. Because you tend to get better decisions when they're made by people closer to the subject matter. Canada found this out. Canada actually has gone through a process they call devolution. It's incredible. They have transferred full control of all of the federal lands and the environmental regulations to the provincial and territorial governments so that they can make the decisions on the spot. These governments are more nimble, they're more able to react, they're more responsive to the people that live there and the needs of the lands and the needs of the people, and it's working. Canada's already done it. States outperform the feds by about 10-to-1 or better when it comes to economics. If you look at the millions of acres of public land that are already managed by states in the West, we are outperforming the federal government in almost every way. In fact, for every dollar that's spent on active forest management, you can save $17 on wildfire fighting costs, and you can save up to $500 in total damages. for $1, you can save $500 if we just put that $1 into active vegetation management instead of this crazy bureaucracy. Can Congress transfer public lands to the states? Absolutely. 4, 3, 2. The United States Constitution, Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2, grants Congress the power to dispose of, in other words, to transfer, to release the title of the lands, the territory, or other property belonging to the United States. Congress already has this power. In fact, they've done it numerous times. And here's something that we dug up from the 1938 edition of the United States Constitution Annotated. If you haven't seen that, find it. It's an incredible resource. It's a congressional publication. And back in 1938, when Congress published this, they talked about states and new states and admissions. And they wrote this in their United States Constitution Annotated: the right of every new state to exercise all of the powers of government which belong to and may be exercised by the original states must remain unquestioned, except so far as they are temporarily deprived of control over the public lands. When the new states came into admission, the federal government was surveying the lands. They were getting the lands ready to take to market, to transfer, to convey, to grant. And so the states quitclaimed and allowed the federal government to continue that process, but the lands were always intended to be transferred to somebody, whether it was to a rancher, a farmer, homesteader, the states themselves. This has been going on for decades, rather slowly, but it's come to a grinding halt here in the last few decades. We're going to talk about constitutional pathways forward in a deep dive workshop this afternoon. I would invite you to come at 3:30 this afternoon in room 505, because there are pathways forward. They are viable, especially with the current administration that we have in Washington, D.C. We are working with the President Trump's administration on transfer of management authority and reforming regulation. What a breath of fresh air it has been to work with this administration. And we'll go deeper into that in the workshop. Utah is getting ready to bring the judicial case, the litigation, to sue the federal government for its constitutional right for statehood equality, so that the federal government will have to follow through and extinguish title to these lands. That's a big case that's coming, so stay tuned for that. We'll give more information about that this afternoon as well. And then finally, the legislative act, allowing Congress to having Congress set up a mechanism that allows the state legislatures to apply for the lands that they want when they want them. Incremental conveyance of federal lands to willing states. So it doesn't have to be all at once. Let the state legislature identify the lands that are important to them and pick out those lands that they're ready to take and start managing responsibly. We welcome you to come to the workshop this afternoon to learn more. I'd love to go into more detail today. I'd love to answer your questions. The American Lands Council has an exhibit over in the exhibit hall, and we'll have that workshop at 3:30 this afternoon. So we hope to see you there. We do have a free gift for everybody that shows up. My name's Jennifer Fielder with the American Lands Council. If you'd like more information, AmericanLandsCouncil.org. We'd love to have you join our organization. Thank you.
Please welcome Dr. Jeff Myers, President of Summit Ministries.
Good morning. At Summit Ministries, we equip a generation of leaders to stand for truth for such a time as this. And this year, we have had the privilege of training 30,000 young people in intensive worldview and leadership training programs. It's been a fantastic experience for us, especially in the day and age in which we live, because we have a generation that is so overwhelmed by social media and the complexity of society that it's very difficult for them to even understand what is really real. It's sort of like if you imagine going to a puzzle shop and you took one piece of every puzzle. It would never make a picture. It never could. And young adults today are so confused about what they believe. In fact, when they post things on social media, we found that they're not even sure what they think. The best I can tell is What they're posting is what they think the people who they think are watching think they should think if they were in fact thinking. But I remain sure that we can win them, even though they're so enamored by counterfeit worldviews that we found that young adults today are even more likely to embrace, who've grown up in the church even, are more likely to embrace a worldview based on Islam than they are to develop a worldview based on a Christian worldview, short of training. We did a study last year with the Barna Research Group, and we found that it's hard to ask questions about Islam, because if you say, do you think Sharia law should replace the Constitution? Most people will say, nah, I don't think that's a good idea. But we ask them, well, how much do you agree with the following statement? The root of society's problem is that people do not obey God, and they should be forced to do so if necessary. More than 50% of millennials either somewhat agreed or strongly agreed with that statement. So we have a lot of work to do in helping young adults get their worldview figured out. But there's some encouraging news. Yesterday we missed the event here because we were down at Jack Phillips' Masterpiece Cake Shop. We had heard that there would be hundreds of protesters, and we thought, it's time to give Jack a break. We will go down, hand out bottles of water, engage people, hand out cookies. And there were hundreds of people there. Only probably 12 of them were protesters. All the rest of us just shared love and bottles of water and bought every baked good in the store. At Summit Ministries, we were able to bring 46 of our students and 5 staff and some directors and bus drivers to be there to support Jack during that time. And I hope that if you are ever in Lakewood, that you will take the time to do that as well. But I wanted to give you just a couple of insights real briefly on what we're finding really helps in reaching the rising generation. We found that Aristotle is correct, that you gain credibility with those you're trying to reach, not because you have all of the expertise, but because you answer 3 questions. Aristotle called them ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos, every young adult you're talking to is asking, are you a good person? Are you a good person? Not just do you want to win, but are you a good person? The second question every young adult is asking is the pathos question. Do you care about people? If we communicate that we only care about ideas, we will lose 75% of the time. What this rising generation wants to know is, do these ideas take into account the needs of people? It's not that hard of a thing to show. We just need to be sure to do it. And then finally, logos. Do you know what you're talking about? That's why coming to events like the Western Conservative Summit is so important, because we have the opportunity to gain the facts and information, to find out the organizations that we can get behind and support and learn from as we take a stand for truth. This morning at 10:45, I'll be teaching a workshop called The Secret Battle of Ideas. And in that, I will give you the insight into how ideas are affecting young adults today, the 5 worldviews that are capturing their imagination, and then 10 ways that you can do specific things you can say and do that will enable you to stand alongside of them and help them become the sort of people who stand for truth for the future of our country. Summit Ministries is a Christian organization, and on the top of our facility, which is an antique hotel located in the little hippie haven of Manitou Springs, Colorado, we have a neon cross. I don't know who put it there. It's been there for a very long time, and I think it's fantastic. In fact, the people in the community sort of view it as one of the strange little aspects of our town. And during a windstorm, just before I came to be president of Summit Ministries 7 years ago, the cross fell over. The next morning, received a frantic knocking on the door of our office. We opened the door, and there was a man standing there, local, somebody we knew to be a Buddhist, and he said, "Your cross fell over, you need to get it back up there." And we asked, well, we sure will do that, but why is that so important to you? Without hesitating, he looked at the representative from the summit staff and said, "Dude, the whole vibe of our town is off when your cross is not on." And we thought, that's exactly the way we want it to be. Thank you so much, and I'll look forward to seeing you at 10:45.
Please welcome Matt Dunn, 710 KNUS radio host.
Yes, Matt Dunn, 710 KNUS Backbone Radio, Sundays. Hope everybody listens on Sunday. A couple years ago at a Western Conservative Summit, I had walked off to a side room to check my messages, and I happened to walk in on Mr. Frank Gaffney, who was conducting a television interview, and I ended up standing there in the corner, and I was absolutely fascinated by what this guy was saying in his interview. Mr. Gaffney's clear-eyed commitment to the survival of the West, his determination to draw attention to the plight of oppressed Christians around the world is very, very important work. Mr. Gaffney served in the Reagan administration. He's the founder, president, and CEO of the Center for Security Policy, and he also has a radio program called Secure Freedom Radio. Let us welcome Mr. Frank Gaffney.
Please welcome Frank Gaffney, founder, president, and CEO of the Center for Security Policy.
Hello, Summiteers. Are any of you people who have been here before? So a few repeat offenders, I guess it's fair to say. All right, well, that helps me a lot because what I'm going to try to do is whip through a lot of stuff, some of which is going to be familiar at least to you, but hopefully reasonably clear to everybody else, on 3 issues. 2 are kind of in the nature of an update on stuff we've been talking about for a long time, necessarily, and 1 is a new initiative, an action item. So let's get cracking. I always start with a genuflection in the direction of my old boss, and this quote, which I hope you have all committed to memory. Every generation faces an existential threat to freedom. So I'm going to talk a little bit about 3 of ours. Enemies, foreign and domestic. I could spend the rest of the day talking about the rather large and seemingly growing number of adversaries, foreign and domestic, but I'm going to focus on 1. It will not surprise you. I want to talk about this, something that I think is best described, as my friend Andy McCarthy has called it, as Sharia supremacism. And by now, at least you folks who've been here before know that Sharia is at the core of Islam, but it is a very special part of what is described as a religion. Indeed, only about 10% by some estimates has anything to do with religion or pietistic practice as we would think of it in other faiths. The rest of it is pretty much a totalitarian political, military, and legal doctrine, which is kind of the problem. A lot of Muslims, particularly in this country, aren't actually Sharia adherent. Zuhdi Jasser is one who's been here with us before. You've probably seen him many times. A good man, and he says it's man-made law, which is what is known in the Sharia deal as apostasy, which can get him killed. These are the guys who would do the killing because they take this very seriously. They believe that it is their God-directed order to impose this program. not only on all Muslims, but on everybody else. And they will use violence where they can, but they will also use other techniques, as we'll talk about in a moment. This is the most important thing I'm going to tell you today, I think, and that is, if we get this right, if we understand what Sharia is, how it operates, we actually can do something about it, because it's sedition. It is hostile to, it is meant to displace our Constitution, our freedoms, our civilization. If we get it wrong, which there are a lot of people encouraging us to do, and think it's all a religion and therefore it must be protected by our Constitution, we are doomed, okay? So let's look for just a moment at what's happening in Europe, where this Sharia supremacism is washing ashore in places like these boats, all over the continent. It has become a nightmare. It is compounding a problem that has already existed there for some time, which is the demographic of large numbers of Muslims who previously came there. And again, not all of them are a problem, but the Sharia adherent ones for sure are. And it turns out that an awful lot of those who came before in Europe and are coming now are with the Sharia program. The other piece of this that I want to mention, in addition to just refugee jihad, if you will, and in addition to this problem of birth rates, is something called civilization jihad, a kind of pre-violent, stealthy way to accomplish what is ordained by Allah in terms of dominance of the non-Muslim world through basically covert penetration, infiltration, and subversion. This is happening, unfortunately, in the United States of America as well. We have at the bookstore some copies of this. If you can't get it today, which I very much hope you will, I hope you'll download it for free at Secure Freedom Radio. What is it? It is the secret plan of the Muslim Brotherhood for destroying Western civilization from within by our hands and the hands of the believers. That's a direct quote, ladies and gentlemen, from something that was written in 1991 as a report back to the mothership in Egypt. And they've been at it for about 25 years before that report was written, and 25, 26, 7 since, which is kind of a problem. Here's the kicker. The leading edge of the civilization jihad in America and worldwide is to try to silence people like me, and for that matter, anybody else who dares to raise an alarm about this. Who's helping these guys? I suspect this has come to your attention, hasn't it? The left. The Southern Poverty Law Center, a fraud, ladies and gentlemen, a political warfare instrument like what's become of the Anti-Defamation League, now using or being used by all of these Facebook platforms and conniving with the European Union as well. This is an existential problem, because if they silence us, we can't defend ourselves against this. Here are some examples of some prime targets for this campaign of defeating, resisting, smearing, silencing, and ultimately neutralizing. You know three of them, I think, very well. One of them is a colleague of mine who just migrated, I'm very proud to say, to be the Chief of Staff of the National Security Council. His name is Fred Fleitz, a great American who has been vilified by the Southern Poverty Law Center, the ADL, the Council on American Islamic Relations, using platforms like Facebook and Twitter to do it, as well as the mainstream media. This must stop. There's an interesting development just yesterday. You may have heard about it. This gentleman, who's just become the Chancellor of Austria, has begun taking some rather important steps to try to protect his country against these Sharia supremacist Muslims, closing 7 of their mosques, shutting down one of their front groups, like these Muslim Brotherhood operations, and beginning to push back in earnest, as are other nations primarily Eastern Europe, but get this, even in Western Europe, apparently Germany, no less, has finally realized that maybe it's a good idea to keep most of these migrants someplace else, as in outside of the European Union. There's hope. We need to be pushing back as well. So that is the first bit, the Sharia supremacist bit. Let me turn to the next. Another existential threat to freedom, those of you who have been with me before know I'm very concerned about, and I think many of you are as well, and should be, is the vulnerability of this country to a kill shot. Conceivably, a single nuclear weapon detonated in space could do the trick. I'm talking, of course, about the grid, our Achilles heel, 3 interconnects. You'll notice that much of that yellow stuff is where we are. That's one of the 3 elements of the grid. These are some of the most important parts of it, these high voltage transformers. We've got about 2,100 of them. If they go south on us, we're toast. How? Because if we don't have electricity, none of these other infrastructures, critical infrastructures, will operate. How could that happen? Well, our enemies are very well aware. You could do it through physical sabotage. You could use cyber techniques. You could use this electromagnetic pulse generated by a nuclear weapon in space, for example. Or, even if nobody attacks us, at some point it is absolutely certain that there will be a solar storm of a sufficient magnitude to fry our grid, unless we protect it. Now, there are ways to protect it, and the military has been doing a pretty good job of this. Way back when I was in the Reagan administration, we were hard at this. It's important to do it for our civilian grid as well, but we haven't. And these are just some reasons that are perhaps hard to believe, but you need to understand that unless we do something about this, all other things being equal, we are going to remain vulnerable to the sorts of attacks that our enemies know could destroy us as not only a country, but honestly, as a civilization. The good news here is that we are working with people right here in the Western Interconnect at the state level, because Washington, as you may have heard, is not working very well at the moment. This is an opportunity to do something at the state level or regionally or both that can be a model for the entire country. We need your help. We're going to have a workshop about all of this afternoon at 3:30 in room 504. Please come learn what you can do to try to protect the grid. Okay, lastly, I'm going to talk about the new initiative. Something I haven't discussed with you before, but I have the feeling is weighing on you as it is on me. And I'm going to tell you just a very quick story about how this has come to be, this new initiative. About 50 years ago, a handful of Jewish activists were desperate to do something about another persecuted minority in the Soviet Union. They started putting up signs in front of synagogues and some churches, and lo and behold, it caught fire. It became a movement. And the movement became political capital, which a guy I actually had the privilege of working for too, by the name of Henry Scoop Jackson. A Democrat they don't make anymore, ladies and gentlemen. But that guy turned the deal of no most favored nation status for the Soviets unless they let the Jews and anybody else out who wanted to go into the end of détente and set up Ronald Reagan for the economic coup de grace that, among other things, finished off the Soviet Union a few years later. This is a miracle, folks. A miracle. Because it not only freed Soviet Jews, of course, it freed hundreds of millions of other people. And it started with signs. As a friend of mine said, a few Jews with signs brought down an empire. Think about what we could do for another persecuted population. You're probably familiar with this photograph. Shortly after it was taken, these men were all beheaded on a beach in Libya by the Islamic State. Sadly, they're not the only ones. According to Open Doors, 215 million Christians around the world. Did you hear that? 215 million Christians around the world are not just having bad days because they're Christians. They're being brutally persecuted in ways like this. They're being raped, they're being tortured, they're being enslaved, they're being crucified, they're being murdered, even genocidally. There are people who are trying to do something about this. I'm sure they're represented here, and I know people like you are supporting them. Thank you for doing so. It's tremendously important and often very dangerous work. But these folks, many of them, have come in alongside an effort to do something more because they know something more needs to be done because this persecution isn't stopping. So, with the help of my colleagues here, we have examples of what I'd like to ask you to think about doing to emulate, hopefully, the beginning of the miracle that might actually wind up saving maybe millions of Christians, as the Jackson Vanik did with those signs half a century ago. We're putting these in the hands of people like you, one per customer, to take to your church or your synagogue or other house of worship and ask whoever runs the place to put them outside so that everybody driving by, as well as the people going in, will know there are people there who care about Christians. So here's some examples of what it looks like. Make one in front of yours. These are ways we're amplifying the messaging. We need help in every single one of these respects. And here are the things we're trying to do to make a difference above and beyond just symptomatically helping those who are suffering. We want the U.S. government, you've heard a lot of talk about maximum pressure on North Korea, right? It turns out that's the worst persecutor of Christians in the world. I hope the president will be making that point next week. But in every other respect, we need to turn up the heat on these guys. We need, as Scoop Jackson and Ronald Reagan did, we need to make sure that there are costs associated with persecuting Christians. And with your help, I believe we will, in fact, save the persecuted Christians. God bless you all. Thank you for letting me join you yet again. Thank you, team.
Once again, welcome Jeff Hunt, the chairman of the Western Conservative Summit.
Friends, when we train our children, when we read the Bible stories to our children about the great leaders of our faith, we talk about Moses, we talk about Joshua, we talk about Stephen, we talk about Queen Esther, we talk about Daniel, we talk about the prophets. Why do we do this? We like to highlight the fact that they stood for their faith in the midst of immense persecution. When the whole world was coming down on them, telling them to give up their faith, they refused. Friends, I am so very proud this morning to introduce to you someone who in our own midst is living up to the same values that the great leaders of the Bible have lived up to and lives in our own neighborhood. Ladies and gentlemen, Colorado Christian University, the Centennial Institute, and the Western Conservative Summit are proud to welcome Jack Phillips.
Please welcome Jack Phillips, Colorado baker and winner of the recent Supreme Court decision.
Thank you. Wow, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be here this morning, for the great pleasure that is for me. And thank you also to the many of you have been praying for me and supporting me and my family over these last few months and years. It's been quite a week, but God is so good. So, most of you know, the United States Supreme Court ruled 7-2 in my favor this week. And my story is familiar to most of you, but with your permission, I'd like to take a moment and share once again why this case is so important to me and why it was worth all the lost time and the hassle and the money and the effort with all the tumult and even threats and backlash. I serve everybody who comes in my shop. Everybody, people from all walks of life, and I give them the best that I have. And I've spent many years honing my craft as a cake artist, combining baking with my love of sculpting and painting and sketching. And I love my work because a cake is a canvas on which I like to express ideas, celebrate events, and bring joy to people's lives. So it was shocking to me that the government would try to take away my freedoms and force me to create something that went against my faith. The government's hostility directly impacted my family's shop, our ability to make a living. We also faced death threats and harassment, all for choosing not to design a cake that celebrates one particular event. I've heard my faith described as despicable, and my efforts to defend my religious freedom have been compared to the acts of the Nazis. And I'm profoundly thankful that the court saw the injustice that our state government inflicted on me. Its decision is great for my family, for our shop, and for people of all faiths who should not have to fear government hostility or unjust punishment. The court's decision makes clear that tolerance is a two-way street. If we want to have freedom for ourselves, we have to extend it to others with whom we disagree. Even about important issues like the meaning of marriage. Our nation is grounded in freedom of religion and the principle that the government cannot be hostile to our faith. And this week, the justices of the High Court affirmed those basic principles. Of course, I'm very grateful to those who walked most closely beside me through this long, tangled legal process. And no one is working harder today to preserve religious freedom for all Americans than the Alliance Defending Freedom. From the beginning, their team has worked not only to defend my case, but to understand where I'm coming from, to know who I am and why my work and my faith are so important to me. They work to be an encouragement to my family and to look out for our rest and security and give voice to the convictions that are sometimes hard for me to express. That attitude begins and ends with the leader of Alliance Defending Freedom, Michael Ferris. Mike has been the president and CEO of Alliance Defending Freedom since early 2017, but I actually knew of him long before that, as many of you did, through his leadership of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, which he founded in 1983. He is also the founding president of Patrick Henry College, a conservative school, Christian school in Purcellville, Virginia. Earlier this year, Mike had the privilege of arguing for the second time before the United States Supreme Court in another ADF case. On behalf of the National Institute of Family and Life Advocates, Mike argued against a California law that forces pro-life centers to promote abortion. We're hoping for another good Supreme Court decision in that case any day now. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great personal pleasure to introduce you to the leader of my favorite legal group, Mr. Mike Ferris. Mike.
Please welcome Dr. Michael Ferris, President and CEO of Alliance Defending Freedom.
Thank you so much. Jeff, I recognize that this is an important conference. I didn't realize how important until this Monday. Everybody expected the masterpiece case to be decided the very last day or so of the Supreme Court's decisions this month in June. But apparently they decided we need the decision in time for the Western Conservative Summit. So they announced it on Monday of this week. Jack, it is such a blessing. When people go to law school, they expect and believe, really genuinely believe, that everyone has a right to a legal representation, to a defense. People represent criminals. People represent people that have done very wicked things. But everybody's entitled to a legal defense. We have the great blessing at ADF that we get to represent genuine heroes like Jack Phillips. That is such a pleasure. It just did my heart good to hear you give him a hero's welcome this morning, because that's what Jack Phillips is. He is a hero of the faith, and we have seen a modern legacy in our own time. It used to be well accepted by just about everybody, the following phrase: I disagree with everything you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. That principle represents one of the most important distillations of the essence of American freedom. Freedom of speech prohibits the government from banning your speech if it doesn't like your content. Even more importantly, freedom of speech means the government cannot compel you to deliver a message that you don't believe and you don't want to deliver. Jack Phillips was put on trial because he exercises freedom to not deliver a message that he disbelieves. As you heard from himself this morning, Jack serves all people, but he doesn't create all messages. And the Constitution of the United States and principles of natural justice say that he's entitled to speak only that which he actually believes. But in reality, Jack was not the only one on trial. In many senses, America was on trial, starting here in Colorado, and ultimately in the Supreme Court of the United States. Because if Jack Phillips doesn't have the freedom to decide which messages he wants to deliver, then America cannot call itself a free nation. Now, Tim Gill, also from Colorado, has declared that he will use his mega millions to use legal and political processes to punish the wicked. That's his phrase. Punish the wicked. The wicked are those who disagree with his views on same-sex marriage and gender-related issues. And he intends to use his massive fortune to go from state to state to state to ensure that people like you and me, people like Jack Phillips, are treated as second-class citizens until we either go silent, are driven from the marketplace, or we ultimately succumb and agree with their views. Our silence or our agreement is the only thing that they will accept. They will not accept our freedom. Now, if Tim Gill wanted to try to use logic or persuasion or evidence to convince people of his viewpoint, more power to him. He's got all the right in the world to try to do that. But when he tries to use the levers of government, when he tries to buy his way into power and use the levers of government to suppress ideas that he disagrees with, he is behaving in a way that ultimately begets an unconstitutional process and is utterly un-American at its core. Tolerance cannot be promoted or achieved by intolerant tactics. And that's what's going on when Jack Phillips is being suppressed, as he was here in Colorado. But it's not just in Colorado. ADF is seeing this all over the country. Atlanta Fire Chief Kelvin Cochran was fired by the mayor of Atlanta because he wrote a book for men in his church that expressed traditional views about marriage. Firing Chief Cochran is unconstitutional and un-American, and ADF is defending him in court. We're in the damages phase of his civil rights trial to make him whole for what was done to him in an unconstitutional fashion. The city of East Lansing, Michigan banned a Christian couple from a farm market because they expressed viewpoints about same-sex marriage on their social media feeds that was contrary to the position of the officials of East Lansing, Michigan. Even though they don't live or their farm's not in East Lansing, they can't enter and sell their products unless they agree with the officials on same-sex marriage. That action is unconstitutional and un-American, and ADF has obtained a preliminary injunction, and that court battle continues. And they are in the farm market now selling their wares because we have gone to court. There's an unbelievable number of public colleges and universities in this country that believe they need to shelter students from offensive ideas. And it isn't too hard to figure out that by offensive they mean conservative ideas, religious ideas, particularly Christian ideas. It's become a mantra for them. I feel hurt and afraid by what you say, and thus I have the right to have you silenced, and you can't speak because I'm hurt and afraid. If being offended by somebody's speech is enough to silence somebody, then let's just take MSNBC and close them down because I'm offended every time they open their mouth. Bill Maher shouldn't ever be allowed on television because I'm offended about everything about Bill Maher. But that would be wrong. I will stand for Bill Maher's right to speech. I will stand for MSNBC's right to be silly and wrong about everything. They have the right to do that because that's what the Constitution of the United States says. And we should not try to shut them down. We should try to show that they're wrong by besting them with logic, evidence, and persuasion. We can win on the facts. We're not afraid of truth. You can see who does not defend the truth when they try to silence others. It is only the weak that try to silence someone because they don't agree with them. Now, back to the colleges. There's no right to silence your opponents. If you're offended, walk away. Turn off the television or argue something to the contrary. A nation that is afraid of speech is a nation that invites a totalitarian impulse, supposedly to protect us for our own good. But despite the lessons of history, that totalitarianism never works out well, never is for the people's good, colleges in this country continue, in the name of trying to protect students, to follow a totalitarian impulse. That's why Kellogg Community College in Michigan and Bunker Hill Community College in Massachusetts had students arrested for passing out copies of a document on campus in violation of their so-called free speech zone policies. What was the controversial document that they were passing out that the students needed to be protected from? It would offend their little psyches. It was called the Constitution of the United States. Now, that's a lawyer's dream. Defending students for passing out the Constitution. That's not just unconstitutional, that is quite literally anti-constitutional, and colleges need to understand that. I've got a message for every public college president in this country. There is a free speech zone. It's called the United States of America. ADF has filed dozens of lawsuits against public colleges for violating freedom of speech, and we're winning. In fact, our win rate there is well over 90%. It doesn't stop the other side from continuing and persisting. And it's not going to stop the other side from persisting in cases like Jack Phillips. Even though the Supreme Court ruled this week 7-2 that Colorado violated his religious freedom by treating his religious beliefs with indifference, disdain, and hostility. This is not everything we wanted. We asked them for religious freedom and freedom of speech. They basically said, we're going to deal with the freedom of speech issues later. because the egregious nature of what Colorado did relative to his freedom of religion is so important. We're going to decide that right now. And it's not a narrow decision about religious freedom. It is a major decision about religious freedom. When you treat people with hostility because of religion, that's unconstitutional, 7-2 by the Supreme Court of the United States. That's not narrow. That is an extraordinary decision that was achieved this week. But the freedom of speech case is going to have to be decided. And we may hear some more about that on this coming Monday. Thursday, 2 days ago, Barronelle Stutzman's case was before the Supreme Court for a vote on whether they're going to grant the case or remand the case in light of Jack's case or deny the case. And we're likely to find out on this coming Monday how they voted. Monday at 9:30 Eastern Time, we'll know a lot about what the impact of Jack's decision was. If I have to guess, I guess they're most likely to remand the case for further decisions, because the hostility of the state of Washington against Barronelle's views, her religious views, was almost as equally egregious as what happened to Jack. Now, maybe they didn't have such quite judges with such loose lips that said vile things, but they did exactly what they did to Jack. The decisions on people on the other side were treated to the contrary. And when other people went to various cake shops here in Colorado and asked for messages that violated the liberal sensibilities, and that was brought to the commission, they said, oh, no, that's protected by freedom of speech. The Supreme Court of the United States said that kind of differential treatment is evidence of religious hostility, and that's present in Barronelle's case as well. The disparate treatment, we believe that we're going to win that case just like we won Jack's case, but there are many more like them that are coming. Hands on Originals, a print shop in Kentucky ADF is representing, who didn't want to deliver a message about a gay pride parade. That's before the Kentucky Supreme Court. Calligraphers in Arizona are before we're taking that to the Supreme Court of Arizona as well. That's in the pipeline. They didn't want to do wedding invitations for same-sex weddings. The Carlson family with their Telescope Media, they didn't want to do wedding videos. They're a great video production company. These cases are in the pipeline. The free speech cases are coming, and the Supreme Court is going to have to ultimately decide it. And we believe that free speech will win and must win if we're going to remain a free country. And it's not just business owners that are being attacked. Churches are being attacked. In Iowa, they passed a public accommodation law that would make churches, we believed, be responsible to have transgender bathroom policies in the churches. We went to court and got a decision. The government said that was what the policy meant. But the courts of Iowa said, no, that's not what the legislature meant, and we won on statutory grounds at this point. Similarly, in Massachusetts, a similar policy was contested in court. ADF defended that, and again, we won on statutory grounds. When we can beat them on statutory grounds, that's how we win. When we beat them on constitutional grounds, that's how we win. But we will not stop defending churches, and we need to understand the systematic attack on churches is coming. For over 30 years, I defended homeschool families. And the way we did it is basically we started an organization where homeschoolers stood together. And we said, you attack one of us, we're all going to come to the defense. And churches need to realize that test case litigation is not going to be enough. ADF, as it was originally situated, and other groups do test case litigation. But HSLDA took all the cases for all of our members. And ADF has started a program just like that for churches called the Church Alliance. And there's a booth here, ADF has a booth here for the Church Alliance program. If you're a pastor, if you're a church leader, you're a member of a church, please go by our booth and find the information about how your church can be defended as a member. So it's not just a test case. If you're a member of the Church Alliance and your church has any legal problems relative to church autonomy or religious liberty, we will defend you. And we will be there for you no matter what. That's an important development I think that churches need to understand. But as Jack alluded to, it's not just the issue of gender issues and same-sex marriage. They're attacking us on anything that we believe and they don't believe. The case I argued in the Supreme Court on March 20th, and the decision will be coming down any day. I'm hoping it'll come down Monday to complete a great 10 days. About 8 days ago, one of our daughters gave birth to our 22nd grandchild. So, yeah. I tell liberals, you take over America your way, we'll take over America our way. Then Jack Phillips was decided on Monday. And then 2 days ago, my beloved Washington Capitals won the Stanley Cup. Let's go Caps! And if the NIFLA case comes down this coming Monday, that would be a great 10 days. Colorado isn't the only state that has crazy legislators. California, they're even crazier. California said that if you're a pro-life pregnancy center, you have to put a sign on your wall saying, if you want a free abortion, please call this 800 number for the state of California. That's just crazy. That's constitutional crazy. That's common sense crazy. And yet, the federal court in California said, oh no, that's perfectly okay. And the Ninth Circuit, to no one's surprise, said that's perfectly constitutional. I'm surprised they didn't say and admirable and wise. They stopped short of saying those things. But the Supreme Court of the United States granted review, and I argued the case on March 20th. And I'm expecting good things. There's no guarantees in this, but based on the oral argument, it seemed to go very well. And when Justice Kagan asked the other side, what was behind this gerrymandered law that was so disorganized in its orientation? When Justice Kagan's answering favorable questions, that's encouraging. That's very encouraging. Free speech means that pro-life centers don't have to promote the pro-abortion message. That's the essence of it. But they're not going to be content until they force pro-life doctors to perform abortions. A nurse that ADF defended in New Jersey, Kathy DiCarlo, was required to assist in abortions. We're defending midwives in Scandinavia before the European Court of Human Rights. We've been engaged in international religious freedom, helping the persecuted church for many years now. And we have a number of cases in the European Court of Human Rights, including homeschool cases from Germany that ADF and HSLDA are partnering on. My old organization and my new organization have been partners on that issue for a long time. We also defended doctors in Vermont who were required by state law to give referrals for assisted suicide. It's just nonsense. They will not stop until they silence all of us who disagree. The totalitarian impulse is out there among the left. They want to train the next generation of college students to believe their left-wing views or be silent. You ask students on a college campus today, are they comfortable wearing a Republican bumper or button on their lapel? They'll tell you no, they're afraid, because the compulsion to agree with the left is so strong in law and culture. We're going to have to work culture differently, but we must respond on the law side and say it is not constitutional, it is not American, it is not fair, it is not just to silence people you don't agree with. There are three things that we got to do to resist the totalitarian impulse. Number one, we have to make sure that we ourselves understand freedom. And freedom means not only do we have the right to speak, but also that people who disagree with us who have the right to speak. And as long as we remember that and promote true freedom of speech for everybody, we are the vanguard of freedom. And most Americans will see the logic and consistency of our viewpoints, and they will join us as long as we take that balanced and appropriate and freedom-loving view. Freedom is for everybody, but we have to also say, you know what? We're going to teach our kids that freedom is for ourselves. Our children are embarrassed to stand up for our viewpoints. We've got to teach them courage, and we've got to teach them what freedom means. And finally, we've got to fight. And we have to fight for our own freedom day in and day out. ADF is by far the largest legal organization in the world doing these cases. We have about 250 staffers, offices all over the world, offices all over the United States. We send our lawyers, the best lawyers in the country, trained to defend freedom, and we need you to stand with us. The ACLU has raised millions of dollars after Jack's case to say, this is a dangerous decision, we have to fight back. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the fight's not over on our side. We thank you for your support. We need your continued support because freedom deserves defending. And you and I believe in freedom, and we will defend. God bless you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Please welcome Mark Barrington, a Colorado Christian University alumnus.
My name is Mark Barrington. I'm a proud alumnus of Colorado Christian University. I have an amazing wife who's a teacher, Jamie Barrington, 2 small boys, Patrick and Oliver. This morning I'm honored to introduce to you Congressman Steve King from Iowa's 4th District. Since first elected in 2002, Steve King has been an outspoken fighter for conservative values. Steve King is a leader in the House Small Business Judiciary Committee, just to name a few. He's a full-spectrum constitutional conservative. He's a leader in Washington on stopping sanctuary cities and restoring the rule of law. We all know that we need more principled leaders in Washington. That's why I'm running right here in Colorado's 7th Congressional District to join Congressman Steve King to fight for our kids and our families and our future. And I know you will enjoy him. Please help me welcome my friend, Congressman Steve King.
Please welcome Representative Steve King of Iowa's 4th Congressional District.
Oh, thanks a lot. Thanks for the welcome here and the chance to be here at the conference. Been a little while since I've been to Denver. And the conservatism that flows out here across these tables or something, I want to listen to all the rest of the speeches today too, and I'll leave as late as I can, possibly tonight. But I've been assigned this privilege to address the immigration issue. And I thought, you know, I don't very often dig back into history and see how we got to where we are. And I think it's pretty important to do that. So I look back and I thought, what do I remember? Well, let's see. I remember that Dwight Eisenhower did enforce our borders and did enforce our immigration laws. And in about 1954, he started a program because we had a lot of illegals in America. I was paying attention then because, well, let's see. I was raised in a law enforcement family. My father was a manager of state police radio stations. I grew up around uniformed law enforcement officers. He was also a manager of a small town in north central Iowa. And the town cop, his name was Henry Nolte, arrested an illegal alien in town one day. 250 people in this little town, so I'll give you the scene, cornfields in all directions. And so that's how we lived. And we brought this fella in who was from Mexico and illegally there. And so my father was also the justice of the peace. You know, we didn't have a lot of people, so you had to wear a number of different hats. But they held court there in the tiny little city hall, which was just an office off of one of the buildings, and decided, you're in this country illegally, so we're going to deport you back to your home country, back to Mexico. And so Dad picked up the phone and he called the Highway Patrol, where he has constantly communicated with them on all of his work days, and said, send a car and pick this guy up and shuttle him back home again. And so they headed south with him in a patrol car, and wherever those district lines are, their patrol area, they stopped and shifted him over and shuttled him south. Now, I don't know if he ever made it back to Mexico, but I know this. I got a lesson on how you respect for the rule of law and what you do when you find out that people are breaking the law. You put them back in the condition they were in before they broke the law. And then, so getting back to Eisenhower, he was carrying out the same thing, only where there was one out of my little town, there were 1 million in the first year he started the program that voluntarily returned back to, most all of them back to Mexico. 500,000 out of Texas altogether, 1954. and they deported 250,000 a year at least throughout the period of the 50s when Eisenhower was president and that program was rolling along. And so I thought, well, let me see. How many Border Patrol agents did they have in 1954? Here's a number, right about 800. 800, 250,000 deportations, 1 million went back home voluntarily, 800 Border Patrol agents. Today, we have 21,000 Border Patrol agents, and we're deported in 2017, 226,000. So we're getting about the same kind of production out of 26 times more Border Patrol agents. Now, why is it we can't put some efficiency into this? We've been at it a while, and I think it's because too many people don't want to really bring a result and enforce the rule of law. My ideal world is in America, everybody that's here is legal. And if you're illegal, you have to go back home. There's no other way to address this with justice and equity. Each succeeding president after Eisenhower enforced immigration law less and less and less and less. And when we got to George W. Bush, he looked at the election results in his 2000 election for the counties in South Texas. They all went Democrat, which is heavy Hispanic, and Karl Rove decided we better make sure that we change our policy. And it was on January 7th, 2004 that George W. Bush gave his first amnesty speech. And I recall that because I sent a letter to them, and I got a call from Karl Rove, and we had a 35-minute discussion that day. And he is saying to me, well, is it amnesty if they pay a fine, if they learn English, if they get an education? You've heard the whole drill. And I said, sure it is. Now let me define amnesty. Amnesty is a pardon for immigration law breakers. It's a pardon. And in this country, it's coupled with the reward of the objective of their crime. They get to stay. If they came to live in the shadows, we're even dragging them out of the shadows and saying, here, we're going to make you a citizen. Too many Republicans are taking that position. I recall in 2005 in this immigration debate that we had that flowed from George Bush's initiative, they bust in tens of thousands to fill up the west lawn of the United States Capitol. And they put matching T-shirts on them. It was a sea of white out there. And then Teddy Kennedy kind of walked out there to speak to all of them before the podium. He had an interpreter. But he said this, and I'll never forget it because it was a clarion call. He said, some say report to be deported. I say report to become an American citizen. That was the message to illegal aliens in America and to those who wanted to come into America and came after that. Democrats are going to pass you down the line of citizenship. And Hillary Clinton ran for president, telling all of us everybody should be a citizen unless they're a violent criminal. So we've seen what happened on the other side, but I didn't think it was going to happen so quickly on our side. And President Trump is President Trump because he stood his ground on immigration. And he said to me one day, and it actually was in the Oval Office in this conversation, he was telling 4 or 5 other members of Congress around that circle, he said, I raised more money for Steve King than anybody else ever did. And I'm grateful for that. I appreciate it. And I said, yes, but Mr. President, I market tested your immigration policy for 14 years, and that ought to be worth something. and so on we go. Border. To secure the border, we are spending today $6.67 million a mile to secure our southern border. 21,000 Border Patrol agents, about 5,800 ICE agents, not many of them down by the border, however. But we track that. We're the only ones I know that figure this out. So I'm thinking, let me see if Kirsten Nielsen would come to me and say, hey, Steve, you know that west mile from your house, that gravel road, we're going to pay you $6.7 million each year to protect that mile, and you can get, 25% efficiency there, and it's a 10-year contract, so a $67 million contract. If they were going to hand me $67 million for that mile, I can bet you there wouldn't be anything get across that mile for that kind of money. And on top of that, I wouldn't go out and hire a bunch more labor. I would build a wall, and it would be solid, it'd be strong. And then I'd put a little wire on top of that wall, and I'd put a little deterrent current in there. Because after all, they're not supposed to be there. And that saves money, and it's efficient and effective. So then they say to me, oh no, on that border, across that border comes 80 to 90% of the illegal drugs that are consumed in America. 80 to 90%. And that's out of the director of the Drug Enforcement Agencies under oath here just a couple of weeks ago. 80 to 90%. We lost 64,000 Americans due to drug overdoses last year, and at least 2/3 of the opioids are illegal coming into America. The opium crop acres in Mexico tripled between 2013 and 2016. So you know the drug cartels are ramping this up, and they're pushing heroin into America, and they're lacing it with fentanyl, and that's such a killer dose that nobody wants to get close to that. So we are the market here for maybe $60 billion worth of illegal drugs, and a lot of that money gets laundered and sent back down south. We're bringing people into this country, and I think there's some things that we're not remembering very well, and that is this, that the young people that are coming into America often are prime gang age recruitment young men. I'm the one who actually has my hands on the data for DACA now. Out of 2 million application forms, 14 million pieces of paper, from last September until about 2 weeks ago, I was digging into USCIS to get that information. I finally had to take 4 of my staff and me over there to have a big conference to get this resolved. So I've got a better look at who DACA is than anybody else. I haven't published much of it yet because I want to make sure I've scoured it thoroughly. But the typical DACA recipient is a 3-year-old girl that was carried across the Rio Grande by her mother, they tell me. And looking at the data, it's clear that that is true. Some of them are that. But also, there are about 135,000 out of the 817,000 that are prime gang age recruitment. And if they expand DACA out to 18, from 16 to 18, you can add another 66,000. So you've got 200,000 young people right in the heart of prime gang age recruitment coming into America, dropping them into ethnic enclaves where MS-13 is as powerful as they are anywhere in the world. And we think somehow we're getting kids out of a dangerous country, putting them into a safer place. As this debate went on in the Judiciary Committee, then Chairman or Ranking Member John Conyers from Detroit was sitting there when they're telling us, we have to get these kids out of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, and places like that, bring them to America because it's too dangerous for them. And I said, well, we'd better not take them to Detroit then, because, or New Orleans, or Baltimore, or Chicago, or a good number of other cities. But here is what's going on. Here's some other data that nobody's looking at. And that is, I wrote this down because it's fresh and it changes pretty regularly. So it's this, that there's ratings out there of the most violent death ratios in the countries in the world. And today, I just checked this morning, 9 of the top 10 most dangerous countries with the highest violent death rate are south of the Rio Grande River. 9 of the top 10, and in fact 10 of the top 11 are south of the Rio Grande River, and one of them is not Mexico. Mexico is 19th. And Mexico used to have 3 times the violent death rate of the United States. Now it's up a little more than that. They have 19 violent deaths per 100,000. We have 5.5 violent deaths per 100,000. So we're bringing in young people. A lot of times they're coming across the border with a pack of marijuana on their back. I've been down there to pick them up. I've seen the videos on top of it. I've walked through the desert. I've covered nearly every mile of that southern border by air or land or on foot. And I sit down and ride with the Border Patrol agents. So I've got a pretty good feel. I've sat down on that border at night. San Miguel's Crossing, some of you'll know it, down in Arizona, the most dangerous crossing. No night vision for me, just sit and listen. And I hear them coming through the fence, 4 barbed wires that, you know, it takes a pretty tame cow to be restrained by that. And they're coming into America and they're hauling drugs in, and the drug cartels, not only do they control the border crossings and control who comes through into America illegally, I mean, they're smuggling people, there's sex trafficking going on, but they also, the Mexican drug cartels control the distribution of the illegal drugs almost everywhere in America. And I asked the director of the Drug Enforcement Agency, under oath again, what would happen if everybody in America woke up, or everybody that was illegally in America woke up in their home country tomorrow morning, magically woke up in their home country, what would happen to the illegal drug distribution chains in America? And he said, it would stop them all, because at least one link in every illegal drug distribution chain is an illegal. And many of them, every link is illegal. So we have to solve this drug problem. We have to solve this problem of violence in America. We're exacerbating it rather than solving it. And that means we have to secure the border, build a wall. I say build a wall at least as tall as they have at the Vatican. And by the way, when the Cardinal tells me that I shouldn't be for English as the official language, I remind him that the official language of the Vatican is Latin and Italian. So I think English needs to be the official language of the United States of America. We need to push assimilation. Push assimilation, build the wall, shut off the jobs magnet. Now we have E-Verify. That just got taken out of the House bill, by the way, so they don't intend to bring E-Verify. I have a better bill even than that. It's called the New IDEA Act. And the acronym IDEA stands for the Illegal Deduction Elimination Act. And what it says is that wages and benefits paid to illegals are not tax deductible for federal income tax reasons. And under a normal audit, the IRS would run the employees through E-Verify. If they are verified, then the employer gets safe harbor. But if they're not, the employer will see that money that he had deducted. Say you pay $1 million in wages, all of a sudden that's denied as a business expense. It goes over into the gross receipts, shows up as net income, and you pay interest and penalty and taxes on that money. Now that's the way to weaponize the IRS, not the way Lois Lerner did it. We do it this way. and end sanctuary cities, and pass Kate's law, and pass Sarah's law, and restore the respect for the rule of law in America. That's the center of this. And so when Ronald Reagan signed the Amnesty Act in '86, it's one of only 2 times that he let me down. I revere that man, but I believed he would he would veto the Amnesty Act because he would have known what it did to the rule of law. And he signed it instead, and I kicked a dent in my filing cabinet that day. I was standing in my construction office. I heard it on the radio, wham, and that dent was in there for years. You always had to jerk that drawer open to remind me, rule of law. We lost a whole bunch of it then. And I knew we'd be years restoring this respect for the rule of law. And I've been working on this for 32 years myself. We're on the cusp of doing that. So I'd just leave you with this image. And because I criticized Ronald Reagan's decision, not the man of the decision, I want to give you a little bit of a Reagan image, but I want to modify it to match to mine. It is this, that when Reagan spoke of a shining city on a hill, that always stood in my imagination as the way he described it. A beautiful picture, a word picture, but a beautiful picture, a shining city on a hill. But I describe America a little bit differently. We are a shining city that's built upon the pillars of American exceptionalism. Sitting on these pillars, and think of them all around in a circle around the perimeter of this shining city. Freedom of speech, religion, the press, assembly, the right to keep and bear arms, property rights, no double jeopardy, jury of your peers, then a number of others that are pillars of exceptionalism, and that is free enterprise capitalism that gives us a vigorous and robust economy. Judeo-Christian values, Western civilization values that you heard Frank talk about, each one of those has their own pillar that this shining city sits upon, but the central pillar is the rule of law. And if we take it away by granting amnesty of any kind, DACA amnesty, we will not live to ever see it restored again. And I will work to fight off any kind of amnesty that they try to bring and do all things within morals and ethics to preserve and protect the rule of law so we can be a shining city on the pillars of American exceptionalism. Thank you very much. God bless you. Thank you.
Please welcome Lisa Lopez, wife of Greg Lopez.
Hi, I'm Lisa Lopez, and I'm proud to present my husband, Greg Lopez, my best friend and the father of our two beautiful children, Michael and Christina. I would like to take a moment to share with you something that you may not know. In 1706, a Spanish soldier discovered this beautiful state. Juan de Ulibarri named our state Colorado. For those of you who may not know this, Colorado is Spanish for red. The liberals say there will be a blue wave. I say, let's bring on a red tsunami with Colorado as the epicenter. It is with great pleasure that I introduce to you my husband, Greg Lopez, the next governor of Colorado. Thank you, and God bless all of you.
Please welcome Colorado gubernatorial candidate Greg Lopez.
You know, as you can see, my wife is the better half. You know, God has definitely blessed me with a wonderful soulmate and partner. You know, across America and here in Colorado, the tree of liberty is dying. The life-sustaining leaves of personal freedom are falling from it. As Thomas Jefferson stated, I paraphrase, it is with the blood of patriots and tyrants that we keep the tree of liberty alive. Over the last several decades, we have seen America's pulse weaken, our nation's arteries harden, and the hearts of too many Americans grow old. I can honestly tell you that my faith in my conservative brothers and sisters and in my country has been shaken. I want us all to believe in America as the land of the free and the home of the brave. Throughout history, there are times when we must all come together to fight for freedom, justice, and independence. Now is one of those times. We must unite and battle the forces that prevent Americans from providing for themselves and their families. If not now, then when? If not us, then who? I say right now, this is our time. You know, thank God for President Trump, the president I'm proud to say that I voted for and I strongly support. Now let me tell you why the other side doesn't like him. It's because he's a leader. And a leader tells you what he's going to do, and then he does it. That is what a leader does. Every election in America is a battle of ideas and values. Our battlefield is the ballot box, and we fight for nothing less than the soul of our country. Colorado is no different. Our election is about fighting for the soul of our state. We fight to defend liberty, freedom for ourselves and for our neighbors. My conservative values, pro-life, protecting the Constitution and the Second Amendment. You know, recently in Colorado, yes, we had a red flag bill. The bill that was a direct attack to our Second Amendment. It was designed to take guns away from people, not dealing with mental health, as the supporters of our bill wanted us to believe. I was the only candidate that spoke against it. I will never allow anything to take away our constitutional rights. I believe in the rule of law, less regulation, limited government, and protecting our borders. Like President Trump, I support legal immigration, not illegal immigration. And as a proud American, I support our president when he says we need to protect our borders. I do not support sanctuary cities. As Americans, we all know that it's the Constitution that protects our freedom and our rights. No one gets extra protection or extra rights. I am not a man of great power, great education, or great wealth, but I am a man of a great God with a passion to help his people to change the course of our great state. You know, I come from humble beginnings. My parents worked long hours in the fields to provide for us boys. My parents taught me two important values: compassion and integrity. I'm a small business owner. I'm the former mayor of Parker. I was elected at the age of 27 and was both the mayor and the city manager at the same time. I'm the former president of the Denver Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the former director of the Colorado United States Small Business Administration. I'm a disabled veteran. I served in the Air Force. I remember the first time I heard the sound of freedom. What is the sound of freedom? The sound of freedom is the sound an F-16 fighter jet makes when it takes off. I love to hear that sound. Apparently, I loved it so much that I lost 87% hearing in my right ear. But I tell you, losing my hearing was worth it because I met my lovely wife, Lisa, while serving in the military. We've been married for over 30 years. And guys, I do have an excuse when she says, "Are you listening to me?" You know, our state is divided between urban and rural. Our country is divided. And our conservative values, the values that God himself bestowed upon us, are being discarded if they were nothing. My values are simple. We are all created equal. Our rights are given to us by our Creator, and it is the purpose of government to secure these rights, not provide them. We need to reconnect. We need to reconnect diverse groups of Americans and find common ground in which we can join hands to solve our state's problems. To all I say, let us face our differences, respect them, and learn from them. Only by doing so can we reunite our divided house and enrich the future of Colorado, a future we can all be proud of. But I can tell you, if we don't band together, if we do not unite as one, where there is no united vision, no united partnership, no strong leadership, we will continue to rot away the future of the generations here and now and of the generations yet to come. And we will see Colorado become the ugly twin sister of California. Our path to victory is simple. We need to win 15% more of the Hispanic and unaffiliated voters. We do that, and we win. The values of the Hispanic community are conservative. I know how to communicate, engage with, and win the Hispanic vote. I am one of them. Unaffiliated voters, they want a strong leader, one that can solve problems with compassion and empathy, someone who truly cares about people. As your next governor, I will promote, protect, and preserve the various economies and the different ways of life that make Colorado the great state that it is. I will protect the heritage and history of rural Colorado. I believe all Coloradans want to live in a state where life is richer, fuller, and better for all of us, not just some of us. It's about all 64 counties, both rural and urban. I envision a state where all the generations of Colorado are working together to ensure that our state remains vibrant and beautiful, where small businesses are flourishing, creating jobs, and every community is thriving. Our state's history is filled with innovators and trailblazers, individuals that were known for being problem solvers, not problem observers. So let me solve a few problems. I will remove the handcuffs, better known as unnecessary regulations, that state regulators love to enforce, which forces small business to spend their hard-earned money on things that make the state regulators happy. That needs to stop. Small business is the life and blood of every community. Not everyone is going to go to college. Not everyone can afford to go to college. It is time to reallocate educational dollars to establish classes that teaches like skills to students like auto mechanics, wood shop, plumbing, cosmetology, hospitality. We need to help our kids to be job ready, not college ready when they graduate from high school. It is time we get serious about building roads and repairing our bridges. Here's an idea. How about the state buys E47 and removes the tolls? Imagine how much life would be better if we didn't have to sit in traffic for hours just trying to get home. Where do we get our money? We reduce fraud, waste, and abuse. We must stand tall and fight for our freedoms and rights. Together, we can reignite the torch of freedom and the resurrection of the American dream into the mindset of all Coloradans. President Trump tells us, no dream is too big, no challenge is too great, nothing we want in our future is beyond our reach. Now is the time to do something. Let us unite and stand together. So stand with me and say, united we win, divided we lose. United we win, divided we lose. In closing, I leave you with these few words from Ronald Reagan. You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We can preserve our children, this the last best hope of man on earth, or we can sentence them to take the first step into 1,000 years of darkness. If we fail, at least let our children and our children's children say of us, we justified our brief moment here. We did all that could be done. My name is Greg Lopez. Join me as I become the next governor of Colorado. May God bless you and your family. May God bless Colorado and the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Well, that was quite a speech. Thank you, Greg. Thanks for taking some time to chat with me, too.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
All right, so I asked the other candidates this, and so I'll start with this question. If you're elected, 4 years from now, you're in front of this audience talking about your biggest success or a couple of them. What are they, and how did you get them accomplished?
You know, my biggest success is going to be when we no longer tell our young men and children that if they don't go to college and get that little piece of paper that says that they got a 4-year degree, that without that, they'll never achieve the American dream. So what I want to see my success is when we bring vocational and technical training back into the high schools. Because I want our young men and women, yes. You know, I want our young men and women to recognize and understand that having a job is a blessing. And what they need to do is work hard. Work hard for that American dream, because we all know that if we stay focused on our vision and our passion, we will achieve that American dream, because that's what makes America great.
Oh, thank you. All right, Colorado violent crime rates ranked 23rd nationally in a recent report. What do you tell parents like me that are worried about our family's safety?
You know, what I tell you is that I believe that what's happened in our society today is because we've abandoned God. We don't talk enough about the sanctuary of life. We don't talk about how we need to take care of each other and how it's important for us to know and understand that we are all individuals, that we're all connected. We need to put away those cell phones. We need to put away all that social media. Let's talk face to face. Let's make sure we understand each other. If we do that, we can reduce all this crime that's out there.
Thank you. And a related topic, immigration and sanctuary cities are a hot topic, right? So how do you work with the city of Denver and the mayor on its stance around sanctuary cities if you're elected?
You know, the mayor of Denver and I go back 20 years. He's a dear friend of mine. You know, I don't necessarily understand why he's taking the position that he's taken with sanctuary cities, but I can tell you this. You know, when you sit down and talk to someone and you share your ideas and you share your concerns, and I think he truly understands that our role as elected officials is to protect our streets, to protect our citizens. And I don't know that he truly understands that the Hispanic community is a majority, does not want sanctuary cities. He's listening to the minority voices, believing that that's the majority position of the Hispanic community. And I can tell you that we are all proud Americans. We want everybody to follow the rule of law. We recognize that our country was based on immigrants. We just want them to be legal. We just want them to do it right. And I think by having a conversation with him, I think we will be able to move forward jointly to remove those sanctuary cities. If not, I think at some point we're going to have to part our ways and make sure that people understand that as governor, I do not support sanctuary cities. But that doesn't mean that we need to be mean or ugly to each other. It just means that we need to agree to disagree. But we need to move forward for the betterment of all of us.
Thanks, Greg. All right, on to the next hot topic, which won't be a surprise. With traffic piling up and potholes multiplying and roads deteriorating, Colorado wants its next governor to fix the dang roads. What solutions do you have ready to roll out?
You know, it's interesting, right? You heard me say earlier, you know, we talk about transportation, and we've done a poor job over the last 12 years in addressing it. What you're seeing is poor leadership. What you're seeing is someone that doesn't have a vision, that does not understand land use and zoning. Because every demographer will tell you we're going to grow. We're going to continue to expand. But we always talk about widening I-25 and I-70. Why is it that we always talk about widening the same corridors? Why don't we talk about identifying new corridors, different ways to get people around? You know, I sat on the board of E-470. You know, it is owned by 3 counties and 5 jurisdictions. When I say I want to buy E-470, I'm serious. You know, I had a conversation with Mayor Steve Hogan. As you know, he passed away just a few weeks ago, unexpectedly. And when we were talking, he said, you know, Greg, I think that's a great idea. He goes, why do you want to buy E-470, though? I said, imagine for a minute what would happen if overnight we took the tolls off and people would be able to bypass the entire downtown corridor and get from Colorado Springs all the way to Fort Collins. Just imagine what that would do. And we wouldn't have to move one shovel of dirt, and we could change the feel of Colorado and Denver overnight. He liked it. I'm going to pursue it. I think we can achieve that.
All right. We have about a minute left. You're a strong conservative. We're a state that's purple, and we're worried that it's turning a bit more blue. How do you connect, if you win the primary, with those voters and get them across the finish line?
You know, I've been doing that already. You know, I go to the Democratic gubernatorial forums. You know, they invite us. I think they invite us because they don't think we're going to show up. And I'm the only one that typically goes. So I've sat next to Jared Polis, Donna Lynn, Kerry Kennedy, and Mike Johnston. Let me tell you this. I've never been heckled. I've never been booed. I've never been mistreated. And they asked me, Greg, why do you come? You know, a lot of Republicans will not even come, as you can see. I said, I come because the governor needs to understand that not only does he represent the people that voted for him, but the people that also did not vote for him. So that's why I'm here. And you'll like this one. They tell me, Greg, how can you be a Republican? You don't even look like one. And I tell them, you know what? I don't know what a Republican should look like, but I know what my values and my beliefs are.
All right, well, thank you for taking the time to chat with me. Thanks, Greg.
Welcome, Jeff Hunt, the chairman of the Western Conservative Summit.
All right, did we have a fun morning? Wow, what a morning. That was just fantastic. Friends, we're going to break now for workshops up in the 500 level, so go up there. Also visit the exhibit hall and make sure to vote in the gubernatorial straw poll. That's going to close tonight. And then we will be back for our afternoon session at 1 o'clock. You're not going to want to miss that. We've got another great lineup, including Ainsley Earhart from Fox and Friends. Will be back here at 1 o'clock. So enjoy the workshops, enjoy the exhibit hall, vote in the straw poll. We'll see you here at 1. God bless you.